Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Yep, the battle for Lordaeron has just happened. Well, if you're American, it's just happened. If you're in the EU, it happens tomorrow. And we've got 2 new cinematics. Technically, we've got 3 because there's a slightly different Horde and Alliance version. So today we're going to be breaking them down. I'm going to be talking about my reactions, my thoughts on where the plot's going, what's up with the various different characters, and we're going to do this video kind of in 2 parts. Part 1 is just my fan reaction, the visceral feel, right, that I get off watching these cinematics and what Blizzard are going for and all that. Then the second half is going to be just doing more of a detached kind of critical analysis thing, as if I was maybe trying to review a movie. So that's kind of the 2 different modes that I'm going to go in for this video. And then I'm also going to do a little special on Arthas Menethil and his story, because I think there's a pretty interesting parallel. So, the Battle for Lordaeron, right. We saw it with the cinematic for this expansion, that big gorgeous battle scene. We of course saw the prelude to it with the pretty damn amazing Old Soldier cinematic. And now the battle itself is something that many people have played. Of course, I've played through all of it on the beta, so I know what's up. And yeah, the battle goes. I'm not going to really talk too much about the battle itself. I've already done that before, but it gets to a pretty hairy point where the Blight gets used, it wipes out Horde soldiers, it wipes out Alliance soldiers, Sylvanas raises them all. It's just a tide of destruction. But then the cinematic plays, and a lot of us have been wondering, where is Jaina? Well, you should have watched Warbringers, the Jaina Warbringers episode, because in that, she reflects on her past. And while she's doing that, she is on a bit of a quest. She's going to find her father's flagship. She starts off in the ruins of her city. She then makes her way to the flagship. She raises it out of the sea. This ghost ship that's just full of memory, and I suppose almost symbolizing the grandeur that Kulturas had before Jaina sort of allowed Thrall to just wreck their fleet and set their nation back years. But Jaina's changed. She now really seems to agree a lot more with her father's perspective, and she is out for war, as you see throughout this expansion and all this media. So, stuff is looking bad. The Alliance soldiers are getting wrecked. The Horde soldiers are even getting wrecked, much to the horror of Saurfang. And, what happens? We see almost like a ghost ship in the sky. Jaina is able to make the boat fly. Look, is that silly? Sure. You know what? It's flippin' cool though. So she appears, she pretty much neutralizes the Blight, does a full broadside to demolish the wall. Boom, the Alliance then get in. You've got this big frantic battle as they're trying to hunt their way down to Sylvanas. As he said at the end of the Before the Storm novel, Anduin thinks she's just gone. She is gone. And he said that even before she burnt down Teldrassil. So you can only imagine his perspective on her now, especially because his city has just been flooded with burn victims, which, if you've ever seen what some of that stuff looks like, it is truly horrifying. So, the Alliance fight their way through, now with Jaina at their side, of course, Alleria joins in, really saving the day along with Makatork, and it all leads up to a confrontation with Saurfang. Of course, we've talked about this before. Saurfang, at this stage, he was filled with hope from his talk with Zappy Boy, thinking, there's a young generation here, there is more to the Horde than Sylvanas. But then, what does he see? He sees Sylvanas basically cover Zappy Boy's generation in blight and raise them as undead, just tools, just meat. So, he's lost his hope, he just wants to die, and he wants it to be an honorable death. You know what, he seems to think that Anduin is pretty much the man for the job, so Saurfang tries to take on the Alliance crew, doesn't really work out, because Anduin is he's a good boy, Gan is a good boy, but Anduin's a good guy, so he just locks him up, says, I'm going to treat you like a prisoner of war, as befits your station. And then we hit the cinematic, right after the Alliance party go to enter the throne room of Lordaeron. Of course, that's a place that's full of history. Big, lore moments, of course, from Warcraft 3 happened there, where Arthas killed his father. But of course, his father's not sitting in the throne. Sylvanas is sitting on the throne. And I'm going to be critical about some of this later on, but for now, the amount of mustache twirling that goes on here, as much as I am critical of it, there is something that's very, very Moorish about it. It's like digging into a cake that's really rich, and you know it's making you sick as you're eating it, but you're there just being like, holy shit, absorbing the venom, the sheer venom that's in her voice. So the voice acting there is so much fun. And yeah, we get to see all of those character interactions. Sylvanas is sort of sitting there, you're like, oh yeah, you've beaten me. Damn. Obviously, Sylvanas' plan for all of this. And what her goal is, her goal is basically to flip use Anduin's strengths as a weakness. And that's always a good idea in really, well, I don't want to say a good idea, it's a effective thing to do. In war, it's also an effective thing to do in, well, if you need to get something done. So one of Anduin's great strengths is his sense of honor, but that can be flipped against him and used as turned into a weakness. So Sylvanas knows that Anduin is going to go up to her and he's going to say, you've done a lot of bad things, you're very bad, come with me, you're going to prison, or, something like that. Maybe you're going to be tried and executed. Something which I suppose is a plot point that Anduin has already went through with war crimes and Garrosh, where a lot of people just thought, look, this guy's so far gone, let's just lop his head off and be done with it. But Sylvanas knows about this. She knows that Anduin is not just going to walk in there and kill her. And she completely uses this fact to set a trap. And I suppose what's interesting to me is the people around Anduin are probably less likely to fall into that sort of trap. Illyria certainly doesn't seem like the type to fall into that trap. Gen certainly doesn't seem like the type to fall into that trap. Gen, of course, as Sylvanas says, control your dog or whatever, when Gen starts to get properly angry. Well, the thing is that if Gen had have just ran up to Sylvanas and started attacking her, that might have actually been a problem for her, because her entire plan relied on talking and then suddenly a surprise. So I would say some very delicious dialogue going there, a very fun scene, very well shot and directed as well, just the angles and stuff, really beautiful. So that was all a lot of fun. Of course, Sylvanas walks up to Anduin, she's sneering, full of venom, taunting, it's all quite gratuitous. And then she pops Banshee form, flies out the window and blows the whole thing up. Of course, she then banshees herself onto the waiting Zeppelin that she's going to fly away on. Of course, and really in this battle, nobody really accounted for Jaina, because the Horde pretty much had the Alliance dead to rights. Suddenly Jaina appeared in a big boat and blew them all up. Well, Sylvanas' plan does not stand the test of Jaina Proudmoore, because she's just like, good thing I'm a mage, teleports everyone out of safety. Meaning that all Sylvanas' plan has really done is made a city that nobody probably wanted to live in uninhabitable anyway, because it was empty, because Saurfang, of course, being the good, upstanding dude that he is, managed to evacuate pretty much all the civilians. So that's really where this has left us broadly. However, there was one bonus scene, and a lot of people, some people missed this because they only saw the Alliance version, and I think it's really important to know this. Bane is not happy because, the Horde side, they leave Saurfang to die because he refuses to come with them. And Bane tries to call out Sylvanas in this, and she pretty much just shushes him. And he kind of goes with it. Now, for a lot of players, they're wondering, really? Is that it, Bane? Are you going to take that from her? Well, one thing from Before the Storm, this ties into the transmedia narrative criticisms that I've had from Blizzard about Blizzard previously. If you read Before the Storm, you will know that Sylvanas knows that Bane had correspondence with Anduin, because the two of them are actually friends. They actually like each other. But Sylvanas knows that Bane was sending those letters, and Bane knows that Sylvanas knows. So he's pretty much in a bit of a bind, where it seems like Bane's personal way of coping is not really doing what Saurfang has done, where Saurfang is pretty much just left. Instead, Bane seems to be trying to do good from within, so as an example, tending to the wounded. And that's really where this cinematic leaves us, with the Alliance up in their ship and the Horde up in their ship. Both leaders of both factions staring each other down, and that's it, the stage is set. I think it's fair to say that the battle for Lordaeron is it's a draw. It's almost certainly a draw because, sure, the Horde maybe did lose their city, but it seems like Sylvanas mostly counted for that. I mean, technically you could say there's a bit of a plot hole because Sylvanas did have them dead to rights until Jaina, maybe via plot inconvenience, or, convenience that wasn't previously set up, just flew in and blew the whole thing up. But then it turns out Sylvanas had a plan anyway, meaning that Sylvanas probably never really thought she would win that battle. So really, Sylvanas went into the strategic overview of this pretty much prepared to let the Undercity go, with the goal being, like, how can we take out as many Alliance people as possible? And she certainly seems to have done that, just taking a scope of that battlefield. I mean, many of you have played this yourself. A lot of deaths, so that's certainly no win for anyone, really. But of course, with Teldrassil, that's an unmitigated Alliance disaster. So I would say that in terms of the scorecard of the battles, the Horde probably are up right now, which means that it's on the Alliance to really take the fight to them as time goes on. And I suppose with characters like Jaina now entering the plot line, maybe she could be the instigator of some sort of future fight because she's back. She absolutely is back. That is like almost my biggest takeaway of these shorts. Jaina's back. She is ready for war. She is ready for business. She's got her big ass ship. And I think that would be really cool. She could be a really fun character to sort of lead players in battle. And yeah, that is my main thoughts. So that's like section 1 of this video done though. Section 2 is when I'm going to step a little bit back. I'm going to detach a little bit and try to do more of the critique thing instead of like my sort of player reaction. But as the interim to this, I want to talk about Arthas Menethil, and I think what I think made Arthas such an interesting and compelling character for people. And it really all goes back to the culling of Stratholme. So Arthas is put in a horrible position, like that training scenario, like no-win scenario from Star Trek. Like there's no way that with the Stratholme situation, Arthas could win, because if he stands by and does nothing, the whole city gets turned, and it's just a disaster. He at least thinks, well, if we cull all of these civilians, maybe we can better control the problem, maybe we can contain it, and that would lead to less death overall. So no matter what, Arthas is in this situation where he just has to do something horrible. And of course, Arthas is so devoted to the greater cause of his people, or at least what he thinks it is, that he decides, my kingdom is worth sacrificing this city for. And while it's very easy to disagree with him, and certainly most of the characters around him disagree with him, like Jaina, like Uther, he does have what I think we can all say is a conundrum, right? It could go either way. There are genuine pros and cons to those decisions. That means that it's a conflicted decision. And when Arthas goes into that, he still is sort of the hero of his own story. And I think there's just a lot of depth there. I think in that case, Arthas was not being a two-dimensional character. He wasn't being pure good. Absolutely not. He was literally culling his own people. Was he being pure evil, though? Well, he wasn't taking any joy in culling his own people, and he was doing it with the maybe misguided thought that it was overall the best thing to do so that he could contain what would likely be a complete, zombie plague that would wipe over the whole of the kingdom, maybe even faster than, of course, things ended up, actually being for the Kingdom of Lordaeron. So that decision is such an interesting bit of storytelling, and it's probably one of the parts of the Warcraft franchise that is most burned into the memory of people. I remember going through that plot line and thinking it was genuinely interesting, at least for me when I was 13 or whatever back then. And to this day I still think, yeah, that was good storytelling. That was Blizzard on their A game. And of course, Arthas did turn into a villain. However, he was definitely a tragic villain, and a lot of his motivations and stuff, they were, you could almost say, morally grey. It's fair to say the culling of Stratholme was a morally grey time. And I mention all of this because I think that was Arthas being a villainous character who had depth, and quite the quandary that propelled them into the circumstances that he found himself in. I thought that was very interesting storytelling. So when we talk about Sylvanas and we talk about the current situations that are going on, I think that the biggest broad criticism is that things are very black and white, and they're very black and white in almost every direction. So the first thing to bring up is the Alliance versus the Horde. Now, one of my long-standing criticisms of the Alliance is they're just good. They're so damn good. You know, they're real good guys. They're real swell. Now, have they done a few atrocities? Yes, like look at the Tauren village during Cataclysm. So they have done bad things, but broadly speaking, there's not much conflict with the Alliance. They're really good, upstanding guys, and to me, that's always made them just a little bit more boring, a bit more plain and simple. And what I've always felt with the Horde is that they were the more interesting faction because they had a lot of conflict going on within them, because the leaders all led very different groups of people. And unlike with a lot of the Alliance leadership, Blizzard didn't really homogenize them together. No, they genuinely had like differences of opinion. As an example, look at the differences of opinion between Garrosh and Sylvanas, two characters who you could arguably say end up going down very dark, perhaps villainous paths, but, you know, look at their differences of opinion when it comes to the campaign in Gilneas. So that's some really potentially interesting storyline on the Horde side. And this is all stuff that I recently covered in a video. So when we look at the current situation, we still have the Alliance being the morally upstanding, totally good guys, and now it is more clear than ever, especially because, like, at one stage, people almost thought Saurfang was going to join them. Of course, on beta, there's, Saurfang and Anduin certainly respect each other, let's just say. So the Alliance have always been good. They continue to be very good. With the Horde leadership, we see Sylvanas really going down a path of being pure evil. As Anduin says in Before the Storm, she is well and truly gone. As people keep on saying as time goes on, she's just gone. Now, she still has a lot of people, you know, locked in on her side. They're in line, even if it's a situation like Bane Bloodhoof, where he's kind of trapped into following her. But she's definitely going down a path that you could say is quite pure evil. Now, the one thing that a lot of people have said is a saving grace of this whole plotline is that there is derision, right? That, like, other people in the Horde leadership do not agree with Sylvanas. Bane Bloodhoof doesn't agree. Varrock Saurfang doesn't agree. Hard to know about, say, as Rolkan, the troll leader, but even, say, with the Cenarian circle, the Horde druids, like the Horde members of that, Sylvanas sends them down to Silithus whenever the burning of Teldrassil is going on, because she knows those druids maybe won't like me burning a world tree. Well, actually, no, she didn't intend to burn the world tree, and that's even said in a tweet by Blizzard. I suppose it's fair to say she knew that there would be a campaign against the Forest and the Wisps, and the druids wouldn't like that. But anyway, the point is Sylvanas is being overtly evil, and there are people within her faction who disagree with her. The problem is that I don't think it's a very interesting disagreement, for the same reason that I think that the current difference between the Alliance and the Horde is kind of boring. Because Saurfang's right. Bane is right. They're both right. There is no getting around the fact that right now they are pure good in the same way that Anduin is pure good. And that means that no matter where we look, between all of the different sides of the game, it's good versus evil, and it's a very pure and simple version of good and a pure and simple version of evil. I don't think that that is particularly interesting, but I do think that it could maybe change over time. For me, the number one thing that I would like to see is some sort of drastic move from the Alliance. Maybe Jaina goes a step too far. Maybe Anduin goes a step too far. Maybe Gen gets sort of taken away in a fit of violence, commands his loyal Gilnean troops to do something that really the rest of the Alliance would find to be quite disagreeable. Perhaps Saurfang ends up getting back into the leadership of the Horde, and he still finds himself at war with the Alliance, but at least it is a war that is motivated by the traditional reasons why a war is motivated. You know, resources, land, sort of genuine disputes that unfortunately are being mediated in the field of battle rather than being mediated by diplomacy. Whereas right now it's not really a legitimate disagreement on anything that's being mediated by battle. It's just, we really have to kill that evil person because she just burnt a tree full of civilians, and then she sort of unleashed bioweapons, and, you know, when her old soldiers died, she kind of raised them up as undead. We which isn't really a morally upstanding thing to do. So the core of my point here is that I don't think that it's an interesting story because on all fronts, whether it's internal conflict within the Horde or the conflict between the Horde and the Alliance, to me it is still pure good versus evil, and I don't think that that's particularly interesting. And it's also very clear that this is all Blizzard's intention. Like, they intend for Sylvanas to be pure evil villain, and they intend for Saurfang to be a beacon of hope. That is exactly how their marketing campaign with all of this stuff has played out. So that's really one of the reasons why I am trying to be genuinely critical, and I know that people at Blizzard will see this, and I know they will probably be a bit bummed out about it, and obviously I don't feel good about making someone feel bad or whatever, like, obviously, but, that still is my perspective. Like, I think that this is genuinely exactly the way that Blizzard wanted it to play out. I think that they, I just disagree with what they wanted to do. And a part of the reason for that is because Blizzard have been really talking up their push for storytelling within World of Warcraft. Now, okay, transmedia narrative stuff aside, I think that's good. I think that World of Warcraft has to push the narrative of the Warcraft universe further. That's the only way that the Warcraft universe is going to survive in a world where we don't get Warcraft 4. By the way, could we please get Warcraft 4? Anyway, it's the only way that, like, this franchise is going to live, so it's got to be telling really good, compelling stories. And I suppose that with Blizzard really trying to step their game up with that, I am finding myself wishing that they matured their storytelling a little bit more. And if I was even to compare this with Mists of Pandaria's narrative, as much as I know a lot of people will be like, oh my god, pandas, when you actually look kind of critically through a lot of the Mists of Pandaria stuff, that's where they started bringing in a lot more adult and mature storytelling. And I actually feel like we've stepped backwards from that point, where right now I feel like we are exemplifying the things that maybe would be the harshest criticisms of modern Game of Thrones, where it's all about shock and it's all about these sort of big epic moments, but the problem is that the interconnecting tissue between those things just doesn't, it's not really done well enough. So I actually think that a plot line that has the literal exact same events as this one, I think that could be really good. The problem is that the motivations that go into all of these characters, they could be tweaked and changed to still have the same outcome and the same events, but have them play out in a way where there's a lot more character depth driving them all home. And I think that'll be a lot more engaging to people, and I think part of the proof of that is Saurfang, because Saurfang's cinematic only really works because he was previously so well established as a character. So we see this, we see how he was established come into conflict with the modern storyline, and out comes a really emotionally affecting, strong bit of narrative work. Now, the problem is that a lot of other characters here, they either don't have that, or they have had a lot of their previous stuff kind of stripped away and rendered maybe sort of done with a bit less depth than it previously had been in-game. Case in point, Sylvanas Windrunner. So really, a part of that is to say that while I love the Saurfang thing, and I love the internal conflict within the Horde, I don't think that we needed to sacrifice the character of Sylvanas. I think that Sylvanas could have been done in a far more interesting way. She could have came to her conclusions about burning the tree in a way that was more fleshed out, a bit like how Arthas decided to cull the city of Stratholme, and instead of Saurfang, reacting to just this literal, clear, evil character, it would be more akin to Uther being disgusted at what Arthas did. Even though there's probably a little bit of Uther that's thinking, but I know why he's doing this. So I suppose that's the core of my criticism with the modern plotline. I think it's a little bit too simple. I don't really think it's that mature, and I think Blizzard can do better. But that said, as I covered in the first third of this video, they were pretty cool cinematics. There were some pretty hype moments. The sheer venom in Sylvanas was great. And like, if they want to do her as what I would say, a pure, boring, evil character, yeah, sure. I mean, they're doing that pretty well. And one example of that in the past is maybe Darth Vader, where, let's be real, Darth Vader is like great in his role for like the first two Star Wars movies, but it's only really in Return where you actually, you just get that little bit of depth that makes him so much more of an interesting character, at the end. So there is room for Sylvanas to turn. and, you know, maybe change up somehow. I don't want her to get a redemption arc. I think it would be more interesting if Sylvanas was to willingly give up control of the Horde to Saurfang. Perhaps she just acknowledges that he's kind of right, and that what she is doing is forked off in a different path. Maybe that would be a more interesting way for the plot to go forward. But there you go. That is my thoughts on the cinematic. That is my analysis of the plotline of World of Warcraft going forward. It's just worth saying, once we actually hit Battle for Azeroth, we're not dealing with this stuff that much. We kind of are in the war campaign, but for the Horde, you go to Zandalar, you meet Talanji, you meet Rastakhan, and you actually have a great plot. There's politics, there's intrigue, there's mysticism, it's great. And then for the Alliance, they've got their old god stuff, they also have some internal politics. So once we actually get into the body of this expansion, like in 8 days? 9 days? Oh my god, wow. You really get a different plot to this one. So that's why this isn't really bumming me out too much, to be honest. I'm looking forward to the 2 plot lines that I know are there once the game comes out. So that's my thoughts. I'm super keen, as always, to hear what you think down in the description or down in the comments of this video. So yeah, that's really all I've got to say in this. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.